Welcome back to The Urban Monk. Pedram here with Jim Kwik, who is a genius. And he didn't start that way. He might have started that way, but then he had an accident. He was not able to use his brain, and right now he has better control of his brain than anyone I know, and I'm surrounded by smart people. You're really going to enjoy this episode, and you're going to learn a lot about yourself. Enjoy Jim Kwik.
So, man, we've spoken at a lot of events together. We've seen each other a lot.
Yeah.
We've been in each other's orbit, and you have this like superpower, and everyone's just in awe of like the stuff that you can do. Let's just put this out on the table first, right? Is this a skill that you were born with, or is it something that you developed when you were young? Like, how did you get to be able to do what you do?
Okay, so when people see me on those events, or they see me on YouTube and I memorize like a room full of people's names live, or long numbers, or 100 words forwards and backwards, I always tell people that I don't do this to impress you. I do this really to express to you what's really possible, because every single person who's watching this could do it also, no matter their age or their background or their IQ. It's just we aren't taught how to do it. If anything else, we're taught a lie. We're taught a lie that our potential or our growth or our intelligence or our memory is somehow fixed, right? Fixed like our shoe size. And we've found, we've discovered more about the human brain in the past 20, 30 years than the previous 2,000 years, right? And we found that it has incredible capacity. It just doesn't come with an owner's manual. And so I actually grew up with, I know it's possible because I grew up with learning challenges. And a lot of people don't know that. When I was in kindergarten, I took a very bad fall and I had head trauma. I had a really bad brain injury, and it left me feeling like my brain was broken. So it's simple things like I couldn't understand what my teachers were telling me. They would have to repeat things 3 or 4 times. I would have no focus. I mean, this was before ADD and ADHD. This was, I didn't have a memory. I didn't remember things that I needed to be able to remember. And it actually took me, Pedram, extra 3 or 4 years just to learn how to read, because I was that challenged. And so, and wasn't born with these abilities at all. It's something that's trained. I believe there's no such thing as a good or bad memory, for instance. There's just a trained memory and an untrained memory. And everyone can learn it very, very simply.
So a lot of people, we've immediately invalidated the fact that you're like some sort of like boy wonder genius who like has a skill that I don't have because I'm stupid kind of thing, right? Like everyone's like, well, he must be so much smarter than me. You banged your head, and you came from a down dog position and really had to kind of claw back your brain power.
And it took some time, because when you're in that position, you don't realize the options that are there for you. And it's not like school was a great place to learn what to learn, like math and history and science and Spanish, but not a lot of classes on how to learn, right? How to listen, how to think for yourself, how to be able to be creative, how to solve problems, how to read faster, how to focus and concentrate, how to remember things. I always thought it should have been the 4th R. They teach you 3 R's in school: reading, writing, arithmetic. But what about retention? What about recall? What about remembering things? And Socrates says learning is remembering. And so I struggled all through school, middle school, through high school, because you feel like you're broken and you're going through this personal suffering. You don't really reach out to a lot of people. So I became very introverted, very shy, because when you don't feel like you have a lot of value to add to somebody's life, I would, for example, do a book report. I was hardworking. Like, I would do the book report in class, but if a teacher asked me to present it in front of the classroom, I would freeze and I would say, I would lie and say I didn't do it. And I would take a failing grade and I would throw my book report in the trash afterwards.
To avoid
the public speaking part, which is really interesting how the universe works, right? My 2 biggest challenges growing up were learning and public speaking. And now, what I do for my mission and my dharma, if you will, is I public speak on the learning and teaching people how to learn. Because what happened was my inflection point, that we all have these points in our life where we go this way or this way, right? And so mine happened freshman year in college. And when I was just happy to get into a university.
Yeah, so you had enough capacity to like white knuckle your way through,
right? Through sheer like willpower and just determination, right? Because I didn't, my family, like many families, just in general, they have many that work really hard, right? They immigrated here, they had many jobs, and I didn't want to disappoint them. So I kept my work ethic because I didn't want to disappoint and I wanted to make them proud. When I got to college, I wanted to show them, show the world, show myself that I was, worth something, that I could actually do this. Took all these classes, thought I could start afresh, and it actually turned out worse. I actually was doing worse in school. And at that point, I was ready to quit because I didn't want to waste, the money and everything. And at that time, a friend of mine said, why don't you, hey, this weekend I'm going to go visit my family. Why don't you take the weekend off, come with me, and get some perspective, right, before you tell your folks that you're going to drop out of school. And so I decided to go. And the family is they're very wealthy, and they're not just financially. They had a beautiful home on the water, but they were happy and they were givers. And the father walks me around his property right before dinner and asked me a very innocent question. Asked me the question, saying, how's school? And that was the worst question anyone could ask me, right? And
so guy's about to drop out.
And being as shy and introverted as I am, I break down and I start crying in front of this complete stranger. And I just tell him my whole story and how I'm just suffering, and it's not for me. I'm not smart enough. I have a broken brain. And he's like, well, why? And this is very, very wise of a mentor to say, right? Like, when we have these coaches, people speak to us through the different universe, if you will. And you just have to pay attention. He says, well, why are you in school? What do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have? What do you want to share? And a new question leads to new answers, right? And then you ask a new question that you haven't been asked before. It takes a little while to think about it. But I go to answer him, and he says, stop. And he pulls out from his back pocket, bedroom, he pulls out like a journal. And I always thought like 12-year-old girls wrote diaries and stuff. But he tore out a couple of sheets, and he handed it to me, and he made me write it all down. And I think that's a real, power lesson, if you will. I find that some of the most amazing, genius, successful people, and however you measure success, they keep a journal and they write in it and they reflect on that. And anyway, he made me write it down. And when I was done, I started to fold up. I think the exercise is over, right? I have this bucket list, and I start folding up to put it in my pocket, and he grabs it right out of my hand. And I'm freaking out because he starts looking at it.
This is private.
Yeah, I didn't know somebody else, this was going to have an audience, right? These are my deep dreams and desires, my fantasies, my wants, if you will. And it's so funny, like, just as we're creative, right? It's, if we feel like there's an audience, we feel like we have to mitigate, and we start editing ourselves and critiquing it, right? But I didn't know it was going to have an audience, so it was very authentic and transparent. And he's looking at it, and I have no idea what he's thinking. But he looks at me, he says, Jim, you are this close to everything on that list. And I'm thinking, you got to be kidding. Give me 10 lifetimes. I can't crack that list. But then he goes like this, and he goes like this to the side of my temples. And I kind of get it, and I get these goosebumps even talking about it. I call them truth bumps, And he takes me into his home, and you love this, into a room that I've never seen before. It is wall to wall, ceiling to floor, covered in books. Like, I've never seen a library in somebody's house before. And he starts going shelf to shelf and just grabbing books and handing them to me. And I start looking at the titles, and they're biographies of incredible men and women in history, and some really early personal growth books, like the Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, Psycho-Cybernetics, real old school. And he asked me to read one of these books a week. And I'm thinking, have you not been listening to this conversation? And I have these learning challenges. I can't even finish one book back in school. I have all this midterms and schoolwork. And he looks at me right in the eyes, and he says, Jim, don't let school get in the way of your education. And I didn't know at that time it was a Mark Twain quote, right? This is like 25 years ago. And but I was like, that's a nice saying, and I can't read all this stuff. And then very smart, wise man, he takes out in his back pocket my bucket list, which he still has, and he starts to read out loud every single item on that list. And something about seeing a complete stranger who's obviously very successful, that you just met, another man incanting out into the universe your dreams, right? And honestly, a lot of the things on that list were things I wanted to do for my family that they can never afford or never do for themselves. So with that motivation or that leverage, I agreed to read one book a week. And so fast forward, and I think motivation is very important to learning in general, and we can talk about that and any kind of transformation. And anyway, fast forward, I'm back at school, and I'm at my desk, and I have a pile of books that I have to read for school and study, and I have a pile of books that I promised I would read, that I wanted to read, and that puts me over the edge. So where do I get the time? I don't eat, I don't sleep, I don't work out, I don't spend time with friends, I don't meditate, I don't do any of that. I just live in the library, and so that's not very sustainable, right? I end up passing out one evening. I fall down a flight of stairs. I hit my head again, and I woke up in the hospital 2 days later. I was down to 117 pounds. I thought I died because of my lifestyle, right? I was hooked up with these IVs, and it was a very dark time. But it's, that expression, it's always darkest before the dawn. I was just wondering what I could do. And the nurse came in with a mug of tea, a mug just like this, and on it had a hand drawing of a pretty famous, iconic, genius superhero, Albert Einstein. And it had the quote that we've all heard, said, "The same level of thinking that's created your problem won't solve your problem." And the same level of thinking that's created my problem, like, what's my problem? I'm like, really, I'm a slow learner. How do I think differently about it? Well, maybe I can learn how to learn. And that's where I dedicated that time, from that moment. I wanted to solve this riddle, like, how does my brain work so I could work my brain, right? How does my memory work so I could best work my memory? And I started studying adult learning theory and brain science and reading, concentration, multiple intelligence theory, learning styles, everything I get my hands on. And within about 60 days, it's hard to describe. It's like a light switch just went on, and I just started to understand things. I started to have better focus. I started to read better and remember what I read, and my grades started to improve. And as my grades improved, my life improved. And after that, you become so charged, you just want to help everyone, right? You learn something brand new. You're like, why wasn't this taught to us earlier on? And I started to tutor. And the reason why I'm sitting here today is because one of my very first students that I was tutoring, she was a freshman in college, she read 30 books in 30 days. Now imagine that, right? Like, imagine going on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, picking up 30 books, like, and sitting down and just like reading a book a day or for a month. And I wanted to find out not how she did it, because I know how she did it, but I want to know why. Going back to motivation, I found out that her mother was dying of terminal cancer, and the books she was reading were books to save her mother's life, because her mom was given 60 days to live. And I said I told her to keep her in prayers and thoughts. 6 months later, I get a call from this young lady, and she's crying, and I find out they're tears of joy, and that her mother not only survived, but is really getting better. Doctors know how, they don't know why. They call it a miracle, but her mother attributes it 100% to the great advice she got from her daughter that learned from all these books. And that's where I learned that if knowledge is power, learning is your superpower.
I want to unpack something, because when you first started looking at this stuff, you were learning techniques, or you were learning theory, and you were learning to understand how the brain works? Because at this point, you didn't go down some sort of like checklist of like, here's how I speed read, here's X, here's Y.
Not at all.
So you had to create a theoretical framework for how your brain works and learns, and in doing so, your brain got better at working and learning?
It did, at a meta level, because I think one of the most important skills to master in the 21st century is the ability to learn how to learn. They call it meta learning. And so that's how we could accelerate people to learn any subject or any skill. And it's really interesting, because we live in this age where our success is not based on necessarily our brute strength, right? For most of us, our jobs, or it's our brain strength. Right, we have to be how creative we are and how many thoughts and the thinking that we have to be able to solve problems and such. And so it's not our muscle power; it's our mind power. But the challenge is we all grew up with this 20th century education. That was developed about 200 years ago. It's one size fits all assembly line education that prepared us for a 20th century world, which at the turn of the century was really working in farms, working on in factories. And so now we live in an age. I know you and I were talking about Elon Musk earlier. It's just, we live in an age of electric cars, automated, right? Spaceships that are going to Mars, but our vehicle of choice when it comes to learning is like a horse and buggy. And that's why people feel so much stress. The amount of information is doubling at dizzying speeds. People feel like it's taking a sip of water out of a fire hose, right? But how we learn it, how we remember it, how we think about it, it's the same. But that gap creates this thing called stress, and there are huge ramifications to our health and our life because of it. Information anxiety. They call it information fatigue syndrome, because everything is a syndrome nowadays, right? And so higher blood pressure, compression of leisure time, more sleeplessness, right? Or if you have some free time, you can't even enjoy it because your mind is still multitasking and it's so, addicted to the digital age that we're in.
And the stress, that delta, the stress of kind of the fear of missing out on whatever that information is.
Right.
And look, it is a survival instinct, right? I mean, look, right now, as we're recording this, Yahoo is up for sale, and they're just picking it apart because it didn't survive, it didn't innovate, it didn't move as fast as Google, and who knows if Google's turn is next. That's a crazy world to live in. It's still a jungle,
right?
And our survival is predicated on knowing.
Right.
and learning.
And it's not even, and it's businesses at a big macro level, but at a micro level, it's individuals too who are being affected. I mean, they're saying now that the average person graduating school is going to have anywhere like approximately 10 different careers, not different jobs, different verticals, because the world is changing so fast.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look at me. I'm sitting here on a set doing like a TV thing. I started as an acupuncturist and kind of, you know, like I'm one of those.
Yeah,
right?
I think we all are.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all subject to this ever-changing world, and so I think one of the most important skills is the ability to to be able to keep up with these changes, to be able to learn, to be able to adapt, if you will, you know, in our careers and in our life also. But this digital age also, besides things like information anxiety, the other part of it is we're outsourcing our brains nowadays to our digital devices. Like, think about it, Pedram. Like, how many phone numbers did you used to know growing up?
A dozen, two dozen maybe?
Yeah, so all these phone numbers as a simple example, but how many do you know like right now?
I barely know my own, man.
Right,
yeah.
And that's the thing. People feel like they're so forgetful, like senior moments are coming so early. They call it, I just did a program for a few thousand doctors, they call it midlife pauses, for some people. But we're absent-minded, we're in the shower, we can't remember if we shampooed our hair. We misplace our wallet, our purse, we call our own cell phones hoping we kept it on to find out where we left it. We lose the keys, or if not the keys, something larger like our car. You see the people outside with their car alarms trying to find out where they parked their car. And one of the challenges is, we outsource our minds to our smart devices. It keeps our calendar, it keeps our to-dos, it keeps, phone numbers, all these things, right? But if your brain is like a muscle and it grows stronger with use, it's use it or lose it, right? And so our brains aren't getting activated that way. And so there's a new term for it. It just came out recently called digital dementia. Digital dementia. It's the result of our brain's ability it's deteriorating because we're not getting the usual exercise we normally have because we're reliant so much on technology. I was talking to our mutual friend, Dr. Daniel Amen, and he was saying that even with third-party devices like GPS, because of those devices, they're not getting early detection of things like dementia or Alzheimer's, because if you're relying on a piece of technology to tell you when and where to turn, you're not realizing when you would normally have memory lapses. So you're not going to the doctors to get checked out for those conditions.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So it's a muscle.
Yeah.
We need to be able to flex it. And so I know that we're going to get into some kind of brass tacks, tactics of ways of learning faster and all that. But I want to stay a little high level for a minute, if you will. Just indulge me, because the theoretical basis of what you're talking about and becoming a learner, it's more of like a position, right? It's a stance in life, right? So what is that like when you finally got the aha of like how you would become a learner? It's almost like you like activated the sponge.
It is. I think we all have those moments. I use the metaphor of a superhero a lot. Because I grew up with these challenges and I couldn't read, I actually taught myself how to read late at night by reading comic books. And something about the illustration, something about good versus evil, something about this story, this mythos, this belief that one person can make a difference. And that's that anybody can, regardless of their conditions. So I believe that we all have those moments in time where we just get more awakened because of life conditions. And I think it's at an identity level. And I think at that moment when I was in my deep study in this space to learning how to learn, that I realized that I had responsibility. Do you know what I mean? Like the people I find that are truly happiest, that they're most fulfilled, are people who have that locus of control inside, right? They're not a victim of their circumstances. It's the equivalent of, I think, especially with your viewers and in your audience, they are successful, they're on their path, and because they're avid learners, that they take responsibility. They're not waiting something to do something to them. They're actively participating. They're watching, the podcast, they're listening to it, they're taking notes, they're actively applying it. And it's the difference in my mind between a thermometer and a thermostat. Right? When we're talking about an identity shift, a thermometer is what a lot of humanity defaults to, and we're all victims of this. But a thermometer it reflects what the environment is giving it, right? So it reflects. So in human beings, where some people, we could be thermometers where we're reflecting, oh, it's the weather, and that affects how we are. It's the economy, and it's how my clients or my boss is treating me that day.
It's my head trauma.
Exactly. It's these stories and these scripts where we become, and we're all subject to it, right? In different respects. But the difference between a thermometer and a thermostat, there's a fundamental difference. Where a thermometer reacts to the environment, a thermostat sets a goal, it sets a vision, it sets a standard, and then the environment changes to reflect that. And I really do believe that, at that time, I was realizing that, whoa, I actually have more control than I was led to believe. Do you know what I mean? Like when I see there's a lot of power that's here, and it's all about responsibility. And recently I got to introduce two of my superheroes, if you will, to dinner, and it was Sir Richard Branson and Stan Lee. And Stan Lee, not Stan Lee, but Stan Lee, the creator of Spider-Man and X-Men and Avengers. And we're in the car, and I'm asking him, we're running a little bit late because of LA traffic, and I asked him this very simple question. I said, Stan, you created all of these amazing superheroes, which one's your favorite? And he says, Jim, it's Iron Man. I'm like, wow, that's great, Elon Musk and the whole thing. He was like, Jim, who's your favorite superhero? I said, mine is Spider-Man. And without a blink of an eye, he goes looking, he said, with great power comes great responsibility, right? And that's like in our DNA. We've all heard it. We don't remember where we heard it, right? And I was like, Stan, that's right. With great power comes great responsibility. And the opposite is also true. And the more I think about it, with great responsibility comes great power. And that means, to me, it means that when we take responsibility for something, we have great power to make things better. And I really think the grandfather or grandmother of all personal growth or transformation is responsibility. It's a decision saying that I could do this, I can make it better, and I will make it better.
The nexus of control, you being a victim, then basically stepped back and had agency. Yeah. And you had less to work with, frankly. I mean, you had banged around your brain a little bit, a couple times at this point. And so, but when you stepped into that driver's seat, then what starts happening with your neuroplasticity? What starts happening with the unfoldment of a new reality?
Yeah, because anything is possible at that point, and we began to unlimit what we was taught. Because I had to overcompensate for, since the age of 5, we're talking about almost a decade and a half of just a story that was totally different. It was like, I am flawed, I am broken, my brain is betraying me kind of script to the area where it's like, okay, this happened, and what can I do right now to make it better? And I think that became my dominant thought at that point. It was like, how do I make things better?
And so how did you start making things better? I mean, I know that there's umpteen techniques out there and all sorts of stuff that one can do. Eat fish oil, do this, do that. Like, what did you do then, and what are you doing now, type of thing?
Yeah, and so I started building frameworks, and I didn't even realize that I was doing it. And it's so funny when we're talking about the principles of how the mind learns. I started to kind of put it out there and just start putting together a visual map of how new things are acquired and retained and encoded and also expressed. And I started studying that, and I started to teach it, because I think one of the best ways to learning something is by teaching it to other people. And so, I think the opening framework that I've had for the past couple of decades is this acronym. I like to teach through acronyms because that's how we learn back in school. It's like the Great Lakes is like Holmes, and Roy G. Biv for the colors of the rainbow, and so on, but is FAST. So if you want to learn faster, remember FAST. And this would happen for anyone who's with us today, that if they have a subject or they have a skill that they just want to accelerate in and become a master, if you will, be on that path, not just to dabble, right, but really get it, is they want to remember FAST. And it's just really 4 stages or steps. The framework, it starts with the F, and the F is if you want to learn this subject, whether it's martial arts or Mandarin, it's Polish or piano, whatever it is, the F stands for forget. And it's kind of weird to start by forgetting, right? But I think a lot of people, Pedram, and I, you could probably identify this. A lot of people, you're there to coach them, you're there to advise them, and take them to new levels in their areas of wellness and beyond. But if somebody is sitting there feeling like they know everything about this subject already, then their cup is full, right? And so I think to learn faster, you temporarily forget what you already know about this subject. And it's you know it's the fable of the apprentice and the master, and the master's pouring the tea, and then the tea just starts overflowing, and then eventually the apprentice says, "Master, master, you know it's spilling, it's going all over the place." And he's like, master says, "You know, I'm glad you see that, because you have to empty the cup in order to put more in, just like you have to empty your vessel," and so on. So I would say the first thing to learn something, you know, somebody wants to learn sales, but you know that person feels like, you know, I've been doing sales for 30 years, you know, what are you going to teach me? Then they can't learn. So they forget about the subject. They forget also about situational things. You know, as you know, people can't be consciously aware of many things at once, if any. You know, the studies go from George Miller at Princeton and Harvard saying 7 ± 2 chunks of information, down to recently they say it's not even that much, it's like 4 bits. You know, but if you're here to study and you're watching this, or you're in a class, and 1 or 2 bits are thinking about the kids and 1 or 2 bits are thinking about the customers, then that leaves you only a fraction of be actually present to actually learn here. So temporarily forget about what's going on that's not urgent and important. And then the third thing I would say is to forget about your limitations. Because I feel like a lot of people, they fight for the limitations, especially when it comes to memory. People come to me and they'll say, "Oh, I'm horrible with names, and it's just biology, and they have this whole story around it." And if you fight for your limitations, you know, we're well aware that we get to keep them, right? And that's the challenge. And so I would forget about your limitations, because most people don't realize what they're really capable of. So that's the F in FAST. And then the other ones are really quick. The A in FAST stands for active. If people want to learn something better and faster, you know, I think one of the big challenges, we all grew up in this education system that trained us to be passive. It trained us to sit there and be quiet and not talk to your neighbor. But we don't learn through consumption. You know, I think it's a big myth. We don't learn by just being lectured to. We learn by creation or co-creation, right? By getting involved. And, you know, here's the tweetable. It's learning is not a spectator sport. Learning is not a spectator. You can't just expect to sit on the bench and learn something. You have to roll up your sleeves and be active. So I would say the next part of the element of this framework is, if you want to learn better, then be active. You know, ask questions, take lots of notes, do all that, get involved. The S in FAST, and you appreciate this with the nature of your work, is state. And you know, it means like the current snapshot, the mood of your mind and your body. And a lot of people, when they're learning in school, you know, when we're comparing back in school, you know, are the state most kids are in, or they're like this, you know, they're bored, you know, it's dull for them and they're tired. And if you're on a 0 to 10, if you're a 0 times anything is just 0, right? Because here's the thing, the takeaway is all learning is state dependent. All learning is state dependent, and we control our state. Remember, agency. You know, we control that thermostat, and so you don't want to learn something in a dull state, because when it comes to your memory, information combined with emotion becomes a long-term memory. You know, information, data, combined with emotions and feelings becomes a long-term memory. And everyone knows that, right? We all have a smell of a perfume or a cologne or a food that takes us back decades, right? A song or tune on a piano that just takes us back, because emotion combined with information becomes a long-term memory. And so you control your state through your mind and through your body, right? And so you can control it with your thoughts, the questions that you have, and also your physiology, you know, how you're breathing and how you're sitting, and you can control your state. So I never want to learn something in a dull state. I want to be fascinated. I want to, you know, as the quote says, you know, I want you to trade your cleverness for bewilderment. Right, you know, and be fascinated, be curious. That's why children, they learn so quickly, because they represent these elements. You know, they don't know what they don't know, right? So they're asking questions. They're active because they're kids. They just jump into the puddle, and then their state is one of wonderment, curiosity, as opposed to adults. And I don't mean adults as in age-wise, chronologically. I mean the age of our mind. Like Stan Lee just recently turned. We just celebrated his birthday, 93 years old. Wow. Right? But he is like the oldest, youngest person I know, because he has 2 passions, Pedram. And you love this, he still goes to work Monday through Friday at 93.
Wow.
You know, because he loves telling stories. And the other passion he has is for his wife, who's 94 years old. You know, and that family, it just lights him up. But he's also learned so fast, you know, because he has such a sharp mind. And we know the correlation health-wise. You know, it was on the cover of Time magazine that they had these super nuns, and they wanted to know how these community of women were living to their 80, 90, 100 and above. And they found out half of it had to do with their emotional gratitude, right? But the other half, and their faith, but the other half had to do with how mentally fit they were. Throughout their whole life, they were lifelong learners and they were actively engaged, and it added years to their life and life to their years. We grow older, but we know we could grow better with neuroplasticity, neurogenesis. So that's state control state. Finally, the T in FAST is teach. Because what I mean by that is if you learned something with the intention of teaching it to somebody you cared about the next day, would you learn it differently? Would you learn it more deeply? Would you make it more personal? Would you ask more questions? Would you take notes differently? And so I always feel like that if I want to learn something really fast, I learn with the intention of teaching it to somebody I care about. Because I think that's the two reasons to learn anything. One is how you're going to benefit, but two is how you're going to share that and light another candle and pass it on. And there's this phrase that we all heard growing up saying, those who can't do, teach. Right? Those who can't do business, teach business. And I never thought, maybe because I was naive, I never thought that was a negative. I was like, wow, if I can't do it, teach it, and then I could do it. Right? And so learn to be able to teach it, because the quote, the tweetable is, when you teach it, you get to learn it twice. When I teach it, I get to learn it twice. So that's the framework that I live by when it comes to learning any subject or any skill faster.
I think of the graduate student who was learning for her mother with terminal cancer, and the presence and the awareness and the enthusiasm that is driving that behavior. I mean, that just turns you into a super sponge.
Right, and it doesn't even, regardless of the technique or the mechanics that you're actually using, it's just when the drive is there, when the motivation is there, it's everything. I really think that there's, because people ask this a lot, they come to me and they say, well, can you improve my memory? And I was like, well, what area of your memory would you like to improve? Some people want to remember names. Some people want to learn another language. Some people can't remember that PIN number, that passcode, that conversation they had, or the dream they had, the other night. All these different things, or give a speech without notes or whatever. And motivation is really, there's three keys to a better memory. Like if anyone is watching this and they feel like they're absent-minded, and what I could tell you is, from all the research that we've seen, about 1/3 of your memory is predetermined by genetics and biology, right? But that means 2/3 is completely in our control, and that's the exciting thing about it, is that we can make it all that area much more alive than we ever thought it's possible. We're just not taught. But I could tell you the three things, the villains, if you will, that keep you from remembering something, like if you're forgetting something on a day-to-day basis, and you do the opposite, is the three things that are missing usually. I call it MOM. Always remember MOM to be able to have a better memory. The M stands for motivation. All right, so we've talked about that a lot. And a simple example, a lot of people have trouble remembering people's names. Yeah. But if we had a suitcase here of $100,000 cash, it's for you, if you just remember the name of the next person you meet, are you going to remember that person's name? Of course, everyone's going to remember that person's name, because they're not even using a technique. And notice, it had nothing to do with their capacity. It had everything to do whether or not they wanted to or not. And so that motivation is there. And I remember I did a talk in Silicon Valley, and afterwards, Bill Gates comes up to me, and we were talking about the future of education. And I was talking about accelerated learning theory, and he was talking about technology and the convergence. And somebody who was sitting there with us asked, well, what's missing? And we were both thinking, and we both came up to the same conclusion. It's motivation. That would be the third leg of the stool. It's understanding human drive and motivation, because a lot of people know what to do, but they don't do what they know, right? And so how do you get people to do the things? And so what I would say for your memory, for example, remembering names, my suggestion would be when you're meeting someone for the first time and you want to remember their name, ask yourself, why do I want to remember this person's name? Take a moment and be present. Maybe it's to create a connection with another human being. Maybe it's to show this person respect. Maybe it's to make a friend. Maybe it's to do a deal. Maybe it's just to practice these things I learned, from Jim Kwik on this podcast. And so here's the thing: if you can't come up with one reason, you won't remember it. Because here's the tweetable, or I always call them quickenings, right? It's like these ahas. It's reasons reap results. Reasons reap results, always, with anything. And so you want to have the reasons. And the O in MOM stands for observation. And a lot of people, they're forgetful. They don't remember the name. They don't remember where they put the keys. They don't remember blank. And it has nothing to do with their retention. It has everything to do with their attention. So a lot of people blame their memory on their terrible retention when it's really more paying attention. And a lot of people, they're not present.
So you bang through a room, it's like, hey, nice to meet you, nice to meet you, nice to
Right.
meet you. You're not even engaged in any of those.
Because you know what people are doing? Commonly, when you go to a wedding, or you go to a social event, you go to a business function, a lot of times you're with somebody, and what you find yourself doing is looking over their shoulder, seeing who else is here. And that's what all these digital devices have trained us to do, right? Like, when you get these dopamine fixes all the time from getting a like or a follow or a share on your Facebook or your Instagram or whatever, it's just training us to be distracted. It's literally rewiring our brain, right? And so, same thing, when we're meeting someone, we're just looking for what all these other fixes, this new novelty, right? And if it's not distracting outside, we're often distracted inside. We're having this inner conversation with ourselves, right? It's like we're not even listening. We're thinking about how we're going to respond to that person. Like, perfect example, talking about presence. Whether or not you're politically aligned with President Bill Clinton or not, everyone would agree he's got great charisma. He's an incredible connector, great communicator. But what a lot of people don't know is he's got a stellar memory. Like, every time I had an opportunity to meet him and to spend time with him, he remembers my name, remembers our last conversation. He asked me very personal things, and I remember asking him, like, how do you remember people's names and do these kind of things? What memory techniques are you using? And he tells me this story about his grandfather in Arkansas and the little kids around, how he would tell stories, but afterwards he would do something different. The grandfather would quiz them to see if they were paying attention, to see if they're really listening. And I noticed that, President Clinton has this incredible presence about him, right? But I think his incredible memory and his powerful presence comes from being powerfully present. Like, when he's with you, he's not looking over your shoulder. Even last time we were at a dinner table and we had all of, like, Richard Branson and we had Forrest Whitaker and Ashton Kutcher and his twin brother, everyone there. But when he's talking to me, it's like no one else exists. And have you ever been with somebody like that just has, and that's what people really want, right? They don't, your children, your customers, your employees, they don't want, gifts and presents. They want the gift of your presence. And so I think President Clinton, his powerful presence and his incredible memory comes from being powerfully present, and he observes. And if you even take a word like listen and you scramble the letters, it becomes the second word, which is the word is silent. Right? And a lot of people aren't just quiet and present. Everyone can remember a name. It's just one word, right? This supercomputer of a brain. And then finally, the second M in MOM, so it's motivation, observation, is mechanics. And those are the strategies, the techniques, if you will, and that are important on how to remember speech or how to hack your brain and everything else like that. But if you don't have the motivation to remember something or to learn something, or if you're not paying attention, the mechanics are really secondary.
It's funny because, like everything else in our culture, everyone goes straight to the mechanics. And you look at the tabloids, it's like, give me the 3 things to do to X, Y, and Z, and tell me
abs,
six-pack abs,
and be
all
sexier and all that.
Yeah, it's all just like, cut this corner, just tell me what to do so I can move on with my life, and zero presence, right? Zero engagement, zero alignment with, like, who you are, your motivation. So I really like how you've kind of created a framework for that. And then once we go in, then the question is, okay, like I've heard like a lot of these, it's like, okay, I want to visualize like a palace, and then you do this and you do that. There's a lot of techniques, right? I'm assuming most of them work, just depends on how you apply it. Do you have favorites? Do you have like a tool bag of stuff that's like, hey, this is Jim's thing?
Well, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm a fan and follower of your work also, because I really think that, half of the game really is presence, and psychology. And the other half, the other part of it is the mechanics, right? Which are the easiest thing to apply. The challenge is a lot of people can learn mechanics for something and they're still not applying it, right? And getting that kind of result. But I do have some favorites. I mean, it really depends on what people want to learn the best and the greatest. I mean, the things that I like talking about are names and giving speeches without notes. The things that are reading faster and having better focus. Those are the things that are really in our superpowers, and I think everyone could do these things. I think the things that move the needle are, so when I talked about 1/3 of our potential is predetermined by genetics and biology, 2/3 is in our control. The 2/3 that really move the needle is your work, the work that you teach and the people that you have in these conversations. I'll tell you the 10 things that I think are help you to unleash your superhero brain, regardless of your age or your background or your career. In no particular order. And people don't have to write this down because I'll show them how to memorize it. But in no particular order, the 10 things I think are going to move the needle for people: a good diet, right? Because you are what you eat. And we could do a whole hour on any of these areas, right? But there's certain foods certainly that's better for your brain than others, and certain foods you certainly should avoid. But a good diet, right? Number 2, I would say killing ants, and I borrowed this from Dr. Daniel Amen. Ants are automatic negative thoughts. Automatic negative thoughts. So I would say reduce those, mitigate those thoughts, because here's the thing: is your mind is always eavesdropping on your self-talk. Your mind is always eavesdropping on your self-talk, and so you want to keep it positive. I remember I was running this marathon. You know, with a name like Kwik, your life is pretty much planned out. I had to be a runner back in school, and I have to be careful when I'm driving because you don't want to get pulled over for speeding, and I have to teach accelerated learning. But running this marathon, I was reading this book, and there's one chapter on the psychology of running it, and it said this verbatim, because I'm the memory guy. It said, your mind is like a supercomputer, and your self-talk is the program it will run. So if you tell yourself you're not good at remembering names, you will not remember the name of the next person you meet because you program your mind, your supercomputer, not to.
Wow.
And that's very true. So number 2 is
a faulty virus. Yeah.
Exactly. And so kill ants, automatic negative thoughts. So the third key to unlocking your superhero brain, the step, if you will, is exercise. Because we know that that movement is key. That we know that your brain evolved to, number 1 priority was to be able to, is to control your body and control movement. So here's the phrase: as your body moves, your brain grooves. We know that by moving your bodies in certain ways, certainly when you want to be able to learn something, you create conditions for you to be able to learn faster. So exercise is very important. People who are more physically active will always do better on mental acuity, focus, memory tests. All right, so exercise. And you could go do a deep dive easily, into that area. The fourth area I would say that's critical is brain nutrients. Brain nutrients. And what I mean by that, very simply, is we have very fast lifestyles. You and I, we travel. Sometimes you can't eat that perfect diet. So supplementing in the areas that you need to that are good for your brain. I would say number 6, clean environment. Clean environment, because I love where we are right now because I'm all zenned out. But your external world really is a reflection of your internal world, and you know this because you ever clean your desk or your desktop, and you organize it. All of a sudden, you feel more clarity here also, and so that's good for your brain. Clean environment. Number 7, I would say this is a big one. You and I have had many conversations about this. This is your expertise, and another one of your superpowers is sleep. Right? Because we know your brain, under a limited amount of sleep, if everyone is on a sleep deficit, they're not getting as much sleep, but we know that's where you're healing your brain. We know that's where you're consolidating short to long-term memory, all the cognitive benefits, and also physical benefit, that's where you're restoring. But most people, they take so much pride in being busy. I'm too busy to sleep, and that's like a mantle that they have, and that's part of their ego, and I think the person that they're hurting is themselves. So make sure you get sleep. And then finally, 8, 9, and 10. 8 is for a superhero brain. You want a brain protection, and that's really simple. It's just, I've had a number of head injuries, concussions. Protect your brain. Avoid extreme situations, extreme sports, wear a helmet, that kind of thing. And for your kids also, certainly. Number 9 is one of my favorites, new learnings. Because when we talk about neuroplasticity, in order to create new connections, between your brain cells, you need novelty. You need novelty and you need nutrients. Right, the air and the oxygen and the proper nutrients to create new connections. But you need to be just like working a muscle. You need to stress it a little bit, make new connections, new movements, new thoughts. So new learnings. And then finally, number 10, and this is again another staple of your work, which I would love to learn even more about, is stress management. A lot of people, they live in this urban world. Everything is happening so fast in this digital age, and the big challenge is stress is one of the biggest obstacles to your brain. It's one of the biggest obstacles to learning. It's really, when you're stressed and you have cortisol, adrenaline, it's really great fight or flight, but it's not really good if you need to study for a meeting. Not really good to prepare for a test. Not really good if you need to give a speech in front of an audience. Yeah. It's not really good if you have to remember someone's name. Yeah. So you want to be able to do that. But those are the 10 things. And notice, when we're talking about on the cover of all those magazines and the hot, 6 things that's going to make you sexier and all that stuff. Totally. These are the fundamentals. They're not getting more sexier than that, but I think the people that excel at the highest level, they get really good at mastering the basics. Yeah. In martial arts, everyone wants to learn a new technique and everything. They just can't even
get your horse stance first.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they compound, right? So when we're talking about something like going and doing a talk, and you're feeling the anxiety already going up. So now the stress is there, and so you're committing to doing something by memory and not taking up your little crutch of your paper because it's almost like idolatry, like you outsource your brain to a piece of paper or a device or something because you've programmed that you just don't have the capacity, and then the stress, and then you're not sleeping, and all the things that go into like the travel around it, and then people are like, I hate public speaking, but if you start to unpack that,
exactly, you deconstruct that, and I really do believe that that genius leaves clues, that when people excel in these certain areas, that they could find out how that when people do something extraordinary, there's always a method behind what looks like magic. There's always a method, but what looks like magic, when people do something extraordinary, like you see that waiter or waitress, takes everyone's order, like 20 people's orders, and they'll write it down. There's something that they're doing consciously or unconsciously that other people don't know. But that those geniuses leaves a lot of clues, and everyone can learn that. And it's a superpower we all have.
And it's so funny, the day and age that we live in, that this conversation isn't more central. I mean, everybody, anyone, if you get a kid, it's so competitive getting into these schools right now. And so everyone's trying to like bang stuff into their heads and memorize things, but no one's learning how to learn.
Exactly, and then just learning through rote and repetition, and the challenge, and where it came from, when religion, when it started schools and such like that, it was based on like this chanting, right? The teacher, it was based on rote memorization, where it wasn't based on understanding the information, it was just based on repetition, where the teacher would say a fact, something that the children would have to learn, and then the children would repeat it, and then the teacher would repeat it again. And so rote is like Rotary Club, it's a wheel, right? And so the first half of the teacher saying it is the first half of the wheel, the class repeating it is the second half, and then they do it 50 times, and they're like, oh, okay, that's the new information. And then they go on to the next thing. The challenge is just like in physics or in marketing or anything, or in your body, there's these variables, right? There's frequency, duration, and intensity, right? You could build your body by the amount of reps you do. You could go to the gym a lot, frequency. The duration, you could spend a lot of time at the gym, or you could hold that stance for longer, right? Or the third area is intensity, which is interesting because you could accelerate this whole process, because the problem with frequency and duration is they take time.
They're time-based.
Right? But intensity, you could do something very intense, just like with a workout or even marketing, right? You don't have to see something, you don't have to see an ad 100 times repetitively or watch a 2-hour commercial. You could see something so intense that touches you that makes you just want to act, right? But same thing with your mind also. You don't need to do repetition or study something for 2 hours. If you understand how your mind works and how it responds, you could see it once and then have that.
The implications of what you're talking about are so far-reaching, and it's shocking to me that this isn't a conversation that's had very early on in like kind of the upbringing of all children in a culture, right? It's just how backwards have we been to not learn how to learn. And it's just, systems and whatever, a big brother guy here, but it's like, now it's here, now it's time, right? So I know that we have some videos of you doing this in front of large audiences and kind of demonstrating all this. I know that's not what, you're not about like trying to look cool, but it's impressive, right? It's impressive. Here's a normal looking gentleman sitting in front of me who's doing some badass things in front of lots of people and proving out that this stuff works. And so you have those available for audience to take a look at because it's too much to do here. I want everyone listening, everyone watching to understand that step that you took in understanding that it was on you. You got to let go of those excuses, and you have to step into your genius, into the superhero you. Was an internal process, and then once you did that, you unlocked all kinds of crazy cool stuff. Right?
Yeah, and then the message when we're talking about things like a superhero you, that's that better version that we know is possible of ourselves. The superhero is somebody who, they have two aspects to themselves. They have discovered and developed their superpower. And it's different for all of us, right? It's their specific strength, their unique talent, or their unique ability, if you will. But just having a superpower doesn't make you a superhero. You have to use that power to serve, right? To serve your family, your community, your customers, and so on. And that's, I think, the mythos. And I think everyone who's watching this, especially they've gotten to this point, I think that they're wearing capes, right? And really the time that, when everything changes in our life, the work that collectively we do, within this whole community of people, and I mean we're co-creating, is I think the ultimate work is about transcending, and if you look at the word transcend, it's about ending the trance that we're not good enough. This mass hypnosis from wherever it's coming from, whether it's government or it's marketing or whatever, that you're flawed and that your potential is limited or whatever is fixed. And it's like, and then just stepping into that power, and without getting totally metaphysical, what I'm talking about is having our agency, right? You are the superhero that you've been waiting for. You know what I mean? It's not, you don't have to wait for Superman or Superwoman. You are Superman, you are Superwoman, you are super teenagers, you are super children, and you just have to make that decision.
And step through it.
Yeah.
It's almost like taking a red pill or blue pill and actually stepping out of the matrix. Jim, where can we find these videos? I'm delighted.
So we put together 4 trainings because as a thank you for all your people watching and contributing, I want to challenge people to go through these 4 videos and just really see what's really possible. And so people could go to Jim Kwik, and you want to spell the name right, Kwik, jimkwik.com/urban monk. jimkwik.com/urban monk, and we have 4 videos for you where I go deep on how to remember names. I teach you how to remember those 10 things forwards and backwards so you can give a speech without notes and read faster and remember more. And it's our gift to you.
Awesome. So you heard it here, jimkwik.com/the Urban Monk or Urban Monk?
Urban Monk.
Urban Monk, and I should go there because I got to remember the URL myself. And I'm going to start looking at doing some of this myself, and I'll report back to you because as I'm sitting here, I'm like, why the hell am I not doing this? So I'm in.
Let's do it.
Great to see you, man. Thank you for being here.
I wish everybody, days people, lots of life and lots of love, lots of laughter, and always lots of learning. Thank you, everybody.
I hope you enjoyed that. Like I mentioned in last week's episode, that I'm actually taking this challenge. At the end, I said, hey, Jim Kwik's coming, and I'm doing his super memory and his speed reading course myself, because why not? I invite you to do the same. Why not learn to become a learner? It just makes us better. Let me know what you think in the chat threads, wherever you see this, and take on becoming a better you, the superhuman you, through what we learned with Jim Kwik. Next week, I got Chris Jaffarier, who is doing some amazing work in green building and innovation. Fascinating stuff. It's about the places we live and how we can live more healthfully and work in environments that are more healthful. So don't miss it. I'll see you next week.